I remember the sound it made against the wall more clearly than I remember my own mother's voice. That should tell you something. Wood carries memory. People say that isn't true, but they've never spent a winter listening to an old house hold its breath around something waiting outside. If I had opened the door the first time I heard it, maybe none of what followed would have happened. Or maybe it would have happened sooner. I still don't know which thought is worse. I only know there was a moment, very small, almost laughable in how ordinary it seemed, when I could have chosen differently. I ignored the sounds outside longer than I should have. That was my mistake. That was the first mistake, anyway. The last one came when I leaned my head against the wall to listen, and something on the other side leaned back. If you stay with me, I'll tell you how it got to that. But understand this first. I'm not telling you because I want to relive it. I'm telling you because sometimes, late at night, when a house settles and you hear 3 small knocks you can explain away, I need you to remember what I didn't. I need somebody else to hear the warning I missed. The cabin wasn't much to look at. 2 rooms, warped pine boards, rusted stove, a porch that slanted enough to make a coffee cup drift if you set it wrong. My grandfather built it badly and stubbornly, which is how he built most things. He used to say a crooked house lasts longer because the wind can't predict it. I used to laugh at that. Dry little laugh. The kind you make because old men believe strange things, and you think time will prove them wrong. Funny what survives long enough to become prophecy. I went there in November after my marriage came apart. That part matters, though not in the way you'd think. People like to believe monsters enter when doors are forced open. Sometimes they enter through what's already broken. I brought too much canned food, 2 rifles I never should have trusted, and a radio that caught only weather reports and static prayers from truckers somewhere over the ridge. Days were simple. Cut wood, check snares, boil coffee black enough to hurt. Nights were longer. The dark out there wasn't city dark. It had depth, layers. It pressed itself against windows. It made you feel watched even when reason told you there was nothing but trees and snow crust shining under moonlight. The first sound came on the 6th night. 3 knocks, soft enough I thought they were branches tapping the siding. I remember looking up from a paperback I wasn't really reading. I waited, heard nothing else. Smiled to myself, almost embarrassed I'd reacted. Wind, I thought. The woods making their noises, old timber settling. Then maybe an hour later, it came again. 3 knocks, different wall. I should tell you something strange. I didn't feel fear right away. That came later. What I felt first was irritation, the kind loneliness breeds. Like the world was interrupting me just to prove I wasn't alone in the way I wanted to be. I even muttered, "Knock it off," as if weather could hear me. That was the only joke I made the whole winter. You can laugh if you want. I did. Once. The next morning I found tracks around the cabin. Not deer. Not wolf. I told myself they were distorted in the thaw-freeze crust. Easy explanation. Necessary explanation. They looked wrong, but wrong can be fixed if you don't stare too long. I didn't stare. That was becoming a habit. Days passed. Then came the scratching. Not violent. Not claws tearing to get in. Just testing. Slow drags across the outside boards at night. Sometimes low near the foundation. Sometimes shoulder height. Once, much too high. I stopped reading in the evenings, just sat by the stove listening to the iron tick as it cooled, hearing the forest breathe. Every sound grew edges. Every silence felt staged. There was a smell, too. Wet earth, rotting leaves, and something musky, like a dog left in rain too long. It came strongest near the north wall. I avoided that wall. Funny how quickly a grown man can reorganize his life around a thing he refuses to name. I told myself it was a bear nosing around, though bears should have been denned by then. Told myself maybe a feral dog, though I'd never seen tracks like those. Told myself many things, because naming a fear gives it bones, and I wasn't ready for bones. One afternoon I hiked to the creek and found a deer half buried in snow. Torn open, but not fed on much, just opened, as if whatever reached it had lost interest halfway through. That unsettled me more than blood should have. Waste is unnatural in predators. I remember touching the frozen rib cage with my glove, cold, like stone, and hearing, somewhere beyond the pines, 3 knocks. Not on wood, as if something was striking a tree with deliberate rhythm. I went back to the cabin before dark, locked the door, as if locks matter. That night I moved a chair against the north wall because I couldn't stop looking at it. I wanted to prove there was nothing there. So I sat watch with a rifle over my knees, trying to feel foolish enough to go to sleep. Hours passed, then scratching, close, right behind me. I froze. It moved along the wall in a long drag, stopped beside my shoulder. Silence. Then one knock. Pause. One knock. Pause. One knock. Not random anymore. Counting. I don't know how long I sat without breathing. Eventually it left, or I thought it did. Near dawn I must have drifted off, because I woke to sunlight and a sound inside the room. Tap, 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 from within the wall. I fired into the boards, reflex, panic, splinters burst. Silence followed, huge silence. I spent all day patching that hole. Didn't look inside the cavity longer than a second. I saw insulation, darkness, something damp. That was enough. I should have left then. You're thinking that, aren't you? Why didn't I leave? Because leaving meant admitting something impossible. And because by then another thought had begun, small and poisonous. What if it followed? That thought kept me there more than courage ever did. The next week, the sounds changed. They circled. Front wall, rear wall, roof. God help me, once the roof. Heavy but careful footfalls over my bed. I lay under blankets holding my breath while snow dust shook from rafters. I heard a low sound then, not quite growl, not quite breath. Recognition, like something realizing where I was. And that was when I first thought of the word I'd spent years mocking when hunters whispered it over bad coffee. Dogman. Even now I hate saying it. Makes it sound like campfire nonsense. But whatever was there wore that shape in my mind before I ever saw it. Maybe because some fears arrive older than memory. A few days later I found marks on the north wall outside. Not scratches, indented prints in old wood, like long fingers had pressed hard enough to leave grooves. 5. Too many for paw, too narrow for human. I put my own hand against one. It dwarfed mine. I wish I hadn't done that. There are gestures things answer. That night the smell came inside. No window open, no door unlatched. Still it filled the room. Wet fur, mud, old blood. I stood with lantern raised, heart beating in my gums, and heard movement just beyond the north wall. Slow, breathing. Then a voice in my head. No, not a voice, that isn't right. An impulse, a certainty. Don't make noise. I obeyed. I still don't know why. Maybe prey knows rules before the mind does. Hours later, near dawn, I heard 3 knocks again, but softer, tender almost, like a visitor asking entry. And for one mad second, I nearly answered. That's the part I've never forgiven. Not fear. Recognition. Some broken piece of me wanted whatever was outside not to be alone. Maybe that came from losing my wife. Maybe loneliness is a beacon. Maybe some things smell grief. I don't know. I only know after that night I started hearing movement before sunset. Earlier each day, closer each time. And sometimes when wind died completely, I thought I heard something pacing in exact rhythm with my own steps inside the cabin. Mirrored, waiting. The open loop you need to hold on to is this. I still hadn't seen it. Not once. Only signs, only sounds, only touch without contact. And that made what happened next worse. Because when you finally see a thing after dreading it in pieces, the mind doesn't break from surprise. It breaks from recognition. The warning came the evening the wall felt warm. I put my hand against the north boards and felt heat pulsing through old pine, as if something living rested against it from outside. Rested, listening, the same way I was. And when I leaned close, against every instinct left in me, I heard a sound through the wood. Not scratching, not breathing, a faint wet click. Teeth, right beside my ear. That was when I should have run. Instead I whispered, "What do you want?" And something tapped back, 3 times. I didn't sleep after that. People talk about fear like it comes in spikes, like a scream in the nervous system, and then it passes. That isn't the worst kind. The worst kind settles. It becomes background weather. It soaks into your thinking until even ordinary acts, pouring coffee, tying boots, opening a can, feel staged beneath some larger attention. That was the state I lived in after the tapping answered me. Because it had answered me. You can tell yourself old boards contract. You can call it coincidence. But coincidence does not wait for a question. 3 taps, a response, an acknowledgement. I knew it. And worse, some part of me believed it knew I knew. The next morning I found no tracks. That bothered me more than tracks would have. Fresh snow had fallen in the night, smooth as paper around the cabin. No prints, no drag marks. No sign anything living had come near, but the north wall, where I'd leaned my ear, held 3 wet streaks running down the wood. Dark, viscous, not sap. I touched one before I could stop myself. Cold slime on my glove. Smelled metallic. I burned that glove in the stove. Didn't help. I smelled it all day anyway. That wet iron smell. Blood, maybe. Or something close enough. I thought about leaving again, packed half a duffel, set it by the door. Then, while lashing the bag shut, I heard movement under the floor. Not mice. Heavy shifting, a body adjusting its weight. Directly beneath me. I froze with one boot untied, heard a slow scrape under the boards, then 3 knocks, from below. I didn't unpack the duffel. I shoved it deeper into the corner and pretended I had chosen to stay. That is how denial works. It dresses surrender as control. That afternoon I walked farther than usual, almost in defiance, rifle slung, trying to prove to myself the woods were still woods. Sun on snow, ravens in dead birch, the creek under ice muttering to itself. For a little while, I even felt foolish for being afraid. Then I found the tree. It stood in a clearing I'd passed before, but I swear it hadn't looked the same. Its bark had been stripped chest high around the trunk, not gnawed, peeled. Long vertical grooves ran down it, parallel and deep, and nailed, no, pinned, as if forced there, was the carcass of a fox. Open from throat to belly. Not eaten, displayed. A warning, or a message. I remember whispering, "No," just that, like saying no could undo a thing already true. Then I saw, in the snow near the tree, a print. Clear this time, no distortion. Long heel, toes, clawed, almost human, if human had gone wrong somewhere in its making. I backed away without turning around. Never turn your back on what may be watching. I don't know where I learned that. Maybe I always knew. That night I barred the door with the table. Ridiculous gesture, necessary ritual. I kept the lantern lit, though fuel was low. Shadows moved with the flame. Every movement looked almost like a figure pausing in corners. Hours passed. Nothing. Sometimes silence terrifies more because it makes you wait. Then came a new sound. Not outside, above me, in the wall. Movement traveling upward between boards, like something climbing inside the cabin itself. I stood with the rifle raised, following the sound as it rose from floor to ceiling. Stopped. Directly over my head. The ceiling creaked once. Then, a voice. No, not a voice. Something shaped like one. A sound from above that almost resembled my name. Half-formed. Wet. Wrong. I dropped the rifle. Actually dropped it. My hands forgot how to hold. That is the honest truth. And in that moment, when terror should have driven me out into snow barefoot if needed, another feeling entered. Pity. Can you understand how sick that is? For 1 second I felt pity for whatever strained to imitate speech through old timber. As if it were trying. As if it wanted crossing. That thought nearly killed me, because it made me hesitate. And hesitation is where things enter. The roof groaned. Dust drifted down. Then heavy movement crossed overhead. 1 step, 2, 3, stopped above the north wall. I stared upward so long my neck cramped. Then something slammed the outside wall hard enough to rattle pans. I shouted, didn't mean to, pure animal sound. And immediately something answered from the roof with a low, rolling growl that seemed to vibrate through my ribs. I fired through the ceiling, deafening, plaster dust, silence. Then a thud outside, running, gone, or pretending to be. I stayed awake until dawn, clutching the rifle so hard my fingers locked. Morning came gray and windless. I climbed outside to see if the shot hit anything. No blood, no body, only deep impressions in snow dropping from the porch roof. And beside them, God, I still hate remembering this. Beside them were human footprints, bare, leading from the tree line to the cabin, then stopping at the north wall. No return tracks, just arrival. You see why I didn't leave? Because by then the question wasn't what was outside. It was whether only one thing had been. That was the second open loop. I carried that all day. 2 possibilities gnawing at me. 1 was monstrous enough. 2 was worse. Toward evening, the radio, dead for weeks except static, crackled alive by itself. I rushed to it thinking weather alert, another human voice, anything. Only static. Then beneath it, 3 rhythmic clicks, like tapping through interference. I smashed the radio against the stove, didn't stop hearing the clicks for hours. By then my thoughts were changing. That's hard to admit. Fear changes thought patterns first, morals second. I started considering traps not for defense, but for capture. Wanted proof, wanted to see it. Wanted in some rotten corner of myself to force revelation. That was my moral compromise beginning. I baited a snare line with venison near the north wall, not for deer, for whatever came close. As I worked, dusk thickened, and while tying wire, I felt it, that feeling, being watched from inches away. I turned, nothing, then slowly looked at the wall, and saw 1 knothole in the old pine darken. Something behind it, blocking light, an eye. I stumbled backward so hard I hit the stove. The dark shape remained behind that knothole only a second, long enough. Yellow gleam, Vertical shine. Gone. I shot through the wall. Again, again, again. Madness. Smoke filled the room. Silence followed. Then from outside, very softly, a chuckle. Not human, not animal. Recognition wearing mockery. I nearly ran then, nearly. But snow started falling heavy, fast. White curtain. The kind storm that erases distance. If I fled in that, I'd die before dawn, and I knew it. So I stayed, because terror outside had become somehow more concrete than freezing alone in the dark. Night closed, storm deepened. The cabin moaned under wind, and near midnight, while feeding the stove, I heard something I have never spoken aloud before now. Scratching on the door. Not random. Letters. Patterns. I stared as claws or fingers traced lines across old wood. Back and forth. Back and forth. Then stopped. And slowly from the other side, 3 deliberate knocks. I did not answer. I backed away. But the latch began to lift, slowly, from the outside. And I realized with a cold so deep it felt ancient. I had barred the door, but I had never locked the window over my bed. And from behind me, in the dark glass, something breathed. I did not turn right away. That may sound impossible. If something breathes behind you in a dark window, every instinct says spin, raise the gun, run, do anything but sit there frozen while your mind fills in shapes. But terror can pin a man harder than rope. I stood facing the door as the latch trembled under slow pressure from outside, while in the glass behind me a pale fog spread where breath touched cold. 2 presences. That was the thought. Outside the door, at the window, the second possibility had found me. And all at once those bare human footprints in the snow no longer looked like a mystery. They looked like a warning I had misunderstood. I turned, slowly. The lantern flame wavered. The window above the bed was black except for frost, and in the frost, a cleared oval where something had been looking in. Just moved, just missed. I rushed to the window, slammed the shutter closed, drove a nail through the frame with the butt of the rifle. My hands shook so badly I bent the nail. Then behind me, the door opened 3 inches, not burst, opened, calmly, as if by invitation. The table I'd jammed against it hadn't held, or something stronger had decided it wouldn't. I fired through the gap. The blast deafened me. The door slammed shut. Silence. Then something hit the outer wall and circled the cabin at a run. Fast. Too fast. I heard it pass the north wall, roof edge, window, back to the door, orbiting, testing, like a thing measuring weaknesses. And under all of it, another sound, inside, a footstep. I spun, rifle up. There was no one there, but I heard it. 1 step, behind the stove. I moved closer. Another, now near the bed, mirroring me. You see what was happening? The boundary had started failing. Outside and inside were no longer separate in my mind. Maybe they weren't separate, in fact. That's where I still lose certainty. I wish I could tell you I kept reason. I didn't. I started speaking aloud just to hear a human voice. Leave. Get out. I know you're there. Lies. I knew nothing. Then I heard, from the north wall, a whimper. Soft, almost canine. Wounded. And God forgive me, pity returned. That poison. That fatal softness. I stepped toward the wall, laid my hand on the boards. Warm again. Alive warm. And from the other side, something pressed back. Not a blow, A palm, long, wide, with impossible fingers, pressed where my hand rested, separated by inches of old pine. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My forehead touched the wall without meaning to, and I heard it, breathing, matching mine. In, out, in, out, mirrored. Then the boards gave a tiny inward flex, as if weight leaned harder, and a claw tip pushed through a crack in the seam. Black, wet, real. That was the moment I told you about, when something on the other side leaned back. My mind broke cleanly then, not figuratively, cleanly. I screamed and emptied the rifle into the wall until the chamber clicked empty. Wood exploded, lantern fell. Darkness swallowed the room. Only stove glow remained, red, low, like embers watching. And in that red half-light, I saw movement by the bed, tall, too tall, unfolding, for 1 second only, a head shaped wrong for any man, ears or points rising, shoulders narrow then broad, long arms almost touching floor, then gone as if darkness reabsorbed it. Maybe you think I imagined that. Maybe. I've begged myself for years to believe that. But what happened next wasn't imagination, because the cabin shook. Something huge struck the outside wall once, twice. Third time the north boards cracked, cold air screamed in, and through the split a hand came through. I use hand because I have no better word, but it was furred, jointed wrong, black nails hooked like tools, feeling, searching. I grabbed the axe by the stove and brought it down. Once, the thing recoiled with a shriek so violent my vision flashed white. Not wolf, not human. Pain and rage braided together. It withdrew. I ran for the door, unbarred it, opened into blizzard. Snow hit like thrown sand. I ran blind into trees with no coat, no pack, axe in one hand. And behind me I heard pursuit, heavy, then lighter, then heavy again, as if more than one thing moved. Branches whipped my face. Snow filled my boots. I don't know how long I ran. Minutes, years. At some point I fell into a ravine, half hidden under drift, dropped hard, couldn't climb out. So I lay against frozen earth, trying not to sob loud enough to carry. And above me, at the rim, a silhouette appeared. Moon behind storm for one impossible second. And I saw it, not fully, enough, tall as a man standing on a stump, wolf-like head angled down, arms too long, chest narrow, eyes catching pale light, watching me, not attacking, watching. That was worse, because it meant choice. It could have come down, didn't. Instead, it lifted one arm, touched a tree beside it, 3 taps, then stepped back into dark. Gone, or pretending. I remained in that ravine till dawn, half frozen. When light came, I climbed out and staggered toward the logging road 5 miles east. Made it by luck or mercy. A plow driver found me near noon, hypothermic, bleeding, raving probably. I never saw the cabin again. Never went back. People ask about the wounds on my forearm. I said branches. Didn't mention the parallel gouges. Didn't mention the splinter of black nail I pulled from my sleeve 2 days later. Didn't mention what woke me months afterward in my apartment, hundreds of miles away. 3 knocks, apartment wall, 3rd floor. No branches, no animals, nothing outside. That was the small payoff. The revelation that distance meant nothing. And the larger one came slower, years slower. When I understood the thing in the woods may not have been hunting me from the beginning. It may have answered something already hollow in me. My grief, my loneliness, my willingness to listen. That thought haunts me more than teeth. Because if it was drawn, not merely passing through, then part of what opened the door was me. And there is still one loop I haven't closed. The human footprints, the second presence. I thought I would die never understanding. Until 6 winters later, I found scratches on my apartment door, 3 parallel marks. And below them, bare wet footprints. Only one set, leading in. I stood looking at those wet footprints until the water around them dried. That detail matters, because I checked twice to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. I touched the tile. It was wet, cold, real. I even pressed a paper towel into one print and watched it darken. Then, over maybe 10 minutes, they faded as if evaporating from the floor itself. No mud left, no residue, just absence. And I remember thinking something so simple it embarrassed me. It found me. Not, it came back. Not, I'm in danger. Just that. It found me. Like a lost thing returning to where it belonged. That thought made me physically sick. I vomited in the sink. Didn't go to work for 2 days. Moved apartments 3 weeks later. Then moved again. You can outrun a memory easier than a pattern. I learned that. Because every place after that developed its own version of the sounds. Pipes ticking became taps. Neighbors walking became pacing. Wind at a vent became breathing. You can call that trauma if you want. I have. Often. I have spent years trying to decide whether what followed belonged to a damaged mind or a damaged boundary in the world. I still don't know, but I know this. The third move was where I met Eli. I haven't mentioned him because I told you this would stay close to one voice. It mostly does. But he matters because he was the first person I ever almost told. Retired electrician. Lived across the hall. Smelled faintly of tobacco and machine oil. Hands always blackened in the lines of his palms. The kind of old man who notices when someone stops sleeping. One night he caught me in the hallway staring at the wall outside my unit, because I had heard it again. 3 knocks, from inside the drywall. And he said, "You hear it too?" Just like that. No preamble, no smile. My blood went cold. I asked what he meant. He looked at the wall for a long time before answering, then said, "Some walls get used." Used, I hated that word. I laughed. Dry little laugh. The first I'd made since the cabin. Didn't sound human to me. Eli didn't laugh. He invited me in for coffee. His apartment was warmer than mine. Radiator hissing. Old radio low. A smell of dust and burnt toast. Ordinary enough to hurt. He told me when he was a boy in northern Maine, his father taught him never answer knocks outside after midnight if they came in threes. Folk superstition, I said. He nodded, then said, most folklore is memory with the names worn off. That stayed with me. He asked what happened to my forearm. I lied. He looked at the scars and said nothing. Then as I was leaving, he handed me a folded scrap of paper. On it were 3 words. Do not mirror. I didn't understand. Didn't ask. Wish I had. Because 2 nights later I woke at 3:12 to tapping. Bedroom wall. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Pause. And without thinking, God help me, I tapped back. Once. Only once. But it was enough. The room temperature dropped so fast my teeth struck together. The closet door eased open by itself. And from the dark inside, a low, wet clicking. Teeth. The same sound through the north wall years before. I stumbled backward, hit the lamp. Light died. Darkness. Then movement in the closet, tall shape unfolding. I ran into the hall, pounding Eli's door. No answer. Pounded harder. Nothing. I used my key from his spare, the one he'd given for emergencies. Went in. Apartment empty. Coffee cup still warm on the table. Radio humming. Front door locked from inside. No sign of struggle. Only one thing wrong. 3 deep grooves scored the wall beside his bed. And on the pillow, wet earth. He was gone. Police called it wandering dementia, though he'd shown no sign. Missing person file. Never found. I said nothing about the grooves, nothing about the paper, but I kept it. Still have it. Do not mirror. Too late, because after I answered the knock, things accelerated. Stakes rose the way storms rise, quietly until they're over you. I began seeing reflections mismatch. My face in dark windows a beat too slow. Shower mirror fogged with finger trails I didn't make. Once in a subway window, I saw over my shoulder for half a second a tall shape standing where no passenger stood. Gone when I turned. Micro hooks, you'd call them if you were studying stories. For me, they were erosion. Little proofs, little cuts. I stopped trusting sleep, stopped trusting reflections, stopped trusting grief itself. Then came the moral compromise I'm most ashamed of. I went looking. Yes, after all that, I went looking. Because fear can turn to obsession when denied too long. I drove north in winter, found a road near the old logging country. Not the same cabin site, I couldn't bear that, but close enough to smell the same wet pine and hear snow creak under cold. I brought trail cameras, bait, even raw meat. I told myself I wanted evidence. Truth? I wanted contact on terms I controlled. Madness dressed as courage. First night, nothing. Second, one camera triggered at 2:07. I checked footage in the truck at dawn. Static. Then one clear frame. Not a body. A hand on the lens. Long black nailed fingers spread wide, as if examining me. Frame after that corrupted. I should have left. Didn't. Third night I heard movement circling camp. Familiar rhythm. Orbiting. Testing. And from the trees a sound I hadn't heard since the ravine. 3 taps on wood. A trunk struck in darkness. Then another farther left. Then another behind me. Not one source. 3. That was the revelation. There may never have been only one. Panic almost made me run. Instead, I did something worse. I whispered, "What do you want?" Same question as before. Same fatal question. From the dark came a voice-shaped sound. Not words, but close enough to intention. And I understood something without language. It wasn't asking entry anymore. It was asking return. I drove south before dawn, shaking so hard I missed turns. And when I got home, taped to my apartment door. No tape, actually. Pinned, forced through the wood. Was Eli's scrap of paper. Same 3 words. Do not mirror. Only now, beneath them, in a different hand. Too late. That was the gut punch. That was when guilt stopped being abstract, because Eli had known. Maybe tried to warn me from something he'd survived. And I had answered anyway. Opened something again. I haven't told you the worst part yet. This is where section endings should give you a threat. Here it is. Last winter, during an ice storm, I woke to breathing beside the bed. Didn't move, didn't turn. Because I knew better now. I stared into dark until dawn bled gray. Then finally looked. Nothing. But on the wall beside my pillow, at shoulder height, indented in the paint, as if pressed from the other side, was the shape of a hand. After the handprint appeared beside my bed, I stopped pretending this was a story with an ending. Up until then, even with Eli gone, even with the cameras and the knocks and the impossible persistence of it, some part of me still believed in a final explanation. Trauma, hallucination, a predator misremembered into myth. Something with edges a rational mind could eventually pin down. The handprint ruined that. Because explanations don't press through painted drywall. Not like that. Not in 5 long indentations that stayed visible for 3 days, no matter how often I repainted. Yes, I painted over it. Twice. The first coat dried, and the shape returned underneath like bruising rising through skin. The second coat cracked along finger lines. I moved the bed. Started sleeping in a chair facing the room. Light on, shoes on, axe by my knee again, though I lived in a city apartment and looked ridiculous even to myself. Old instincts don't care about dignity. They care about surviving one more night. That was when acceptance began curdling into something worse. Expectation. I began expecting it, not fearing a return, awaiting one. That may be the deepest corruption of prolonged dread. It teaches you to organize life around visitation. I ate less, spoke less, stopped answering friends. And one night, while sitting awake near dawn, I heard a sound I recognized before it fully formed. A slow drag across the wall, shoulder height, moving toward me, exactly as it had in the cabin. I gripped the axe so hard my wrist cramped. The drag stopped beside my chair. Silence. Then, one knock, pause, one knock, pause, one knock, counting. I almost wept. Not from terror, from recognition. Because the pattern had survived years, distance, cities, loss, as if time meant less to it than I'd assumed. Then came the major revelation, or what I think was one. The next morning I opened a box I had not touched since moving years before. Inside were old papers, my ex-wife's letters, photographs, and at the bottom, wrapped in a dish towel, something I had forgotten I kept. The splinter. That black shard I pulled from my sleeve after the cabin. Hard as horn, curved, like part of a claw. I held it in daylight for the first time in years, and noticed etched lines along its surface, not scratches, marks, patterned. 3 repeated notches. 3. Everywhere. I felt suddenly, irrationally certain it was not broken off by accident. It had been left. A marker. A tether. I nearly threw it away. Didn't. Again that fatal impulse to keep contact, to preserve evidence, to preserve the wound. That evening, as rain struck windows, I placed the splinter on the kitchen table and stared at it too long. I must have drifted half asleep in the chair, because I woke to a soft tapping. Not wall, table. The splinter was moving. Tiny shifts, rocking upright, then falling, as if responding to knocks I couldn't hear. I know how that sounds. Believe what you like. I'm telling you what happened. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. 3:12 a.m. I answered, only breathing, wet, slow. Then 3 clicks. Line dead. That was when I understood this wasn't only haunting. It adapted. Medium changed. Pattern didn't. I made one final decision after that. Desperate action. Section 7 of the emotional arc, if you like structure. For me it was surrender, disguised as investigation. I went back. To the cabin, or what remained. Snowmelt season, road half washed out, trees thicker, place smaller than memory. That unsettled me most. Trauma enlarges things. Reality sometimes shrinks them. The cabin stood collapsed on one side, roof caved. north wall still partly upright. I stood there an hour before entering, couldn't force my legs. Then I went in. Wet rot smell, mold, animal scat, sun through broken rafters, and silence. Not ordinary silence, held silence, waiting silence. I found the bullet scars in the wall, my shots, still there. Found the split where the hand came through, still there. And near the stove, under debris, an old patch of dark stain, brown-black. Could have been rust, could have been blood. Then I found something buried in dirt beneath the north wall. A child's tin box. Not mine. Rust sealed. I pried it open with the axe. Inside, photographs. Old, black and white. One showed the cabin when newer. Another showed a family on the porch. Man, woman, and something tall in the tree line behind them. I only noticed after several seconds. Blurred, but there. The last photograph froze me. A younger version of my grandfather, standing beside the north wall, hand pressed flat against the boards, mirroring. I dropped the photo. Do not mirror. Too late. The warning wasn't folklore, it was instruction. And my grandfather had broken it too, maybe before me. Maybe that crooked house lasted because the wind couldn't predict it, or because something else used it. Then I heard movement behind the wall. Not possible, with half the structure open to daylight. Still I heard it. A shift. A breath. And from within rotten boards. My name. Clearer this time. Not almost speech. Speech. I ran. I admit it. Ran like an animal. But at the tree line I stopped because something made me look back. On the north wall, in full daylight, pressed outward from inside the wood. A hand shape bulged. 5 long fingers, pushing, as if the wall were skin. I left the photographs, took only one. The one with my grandfather. It sits beside me as I tell this. Proof, if proof matters. But the true climax didn't happen there. It happened last month. Yes, recently. That's why I'm telling you now. I woke to 3 knocks from inside my bedroom closet. Didn't answer. Didn't move. Remembered Eli. Remembered the rule. Then the closet door opened on its own. Slowly. And from the dark inside, a voice exactly like mine whispered, "You already did." That was the loss. Not blood, not death. Something worse. The suspicion the answering happened long ago, and what remains of me may be living after the wrong choice. Since then, mirrors trouble me. Sometimes in passing glass my reflection lingers half a beat. Sometimes smiles when I don't. I avoid looking long, because I don't know anymore whether do not mirror meant do not imitate the knocks, or do not look too long at what has begun copying you. And tonight, before I started telling you this, while setting my hand on the desk, I noticed 3 black notches in my thumbnail. Marks I do not remember having yesterday. There is only aftermath now. Numbness, guilt, acceptance trying to form. But one final loop remains unresolved. The one I can't answer for you. Sometimes very late, when I place my palm against the wall beside my bed, something presses back. And lately, it feels warmer than my own hand. The first time I noticed it felt warmer than my own hand, I pulled away so fast I knocked over the lamp. That old reflex, still alive, still stupidly hopeful that speed matters. The bulb rolled, light swinging across the room in slow arcs, and every pass of shadow made the walls seem to breathe. I sat there on the floor, staring at the place I had touched, waiting for some final manifestation. Claw through plaster, voice in the dark, the obvious horror stories promise. Nothing came, just silence. And that was worse, because by then I had learned the pattern. The worst things never arrived at the moment I expected. They arrived after I convinced myself the moment had passed. That night I did something I had avoided for years. I looked in the mirror. Fully. Deliberately. Bathroom light humming overhead. Cold tile under bare feet. Face older than I felt. Eyes ringed dark from too little sleep. Ordinary. Painfully ordinary. And for 1 second, I almost laughed at myself. Dry little laugh. Almost. Then my reflection raised its left hand. I had raised my right. You understand. Half a beat. Mismatch. Then it corrected perfectly, as if realizing I'd noticed. I stumbled backward into the sink, hard enough to bruise a rib. Didn't look again for 2 weeks. That was the final escalation. Identity-level consequences. The stakes had nowhere else to go. Because once you doubt whether what mirrors you is actually mirroring, you begin doubting which side initiated the motion. That thought hollowed me. I stopped sleeping at home. Spent nights driving, parking in 24-hour lots under floodlights, falling asleep in the car with the doors locked. But one dawn, waking in the driver's seat with frost on the windshield, I saw traced in condensation from the outside 3 lines, parallel, dragged by a finger or claw, from top to bottom. And below them, written backward, as if for me to read from inside, "Come back." I drove before the engine warmed. Didn't read it twice. Didn't need to, because I already knew where. The cabin wasn't the point anymore. The wall wasn't the point. Return was. That word. It infected everything. And in the days after, memories started shifting, or seemed to. This is hard to explain without sounding insane. Events I was certain of felt rearranged. Did I really ask, "What do you want?" twice? Or more? Did Eli truly disappear after warning me? Or had he been warning himself? Sometimes I remembered my grandfather pressing his hand to the wall. Sometimes I remembered, impossibly, being a child watching him do it. I was never there as a child, was I? You hear the unreliability entering. I hear it too. That's why I have to tell you the last thing that happened before I decide whether any of this can still be called my story. 3 nights ago, during rain, soft, steady rain that makes city noise vanish, I woke to knocking, not wall, bedroom door. 3 knocks, pause. 3 knocks, pause. I did not answer, did not move, held my breath. Then in my own voice from the other side, "It's cold." I felt every hair rise, because I had said those words once at the cabin, half joking to myself while feeding the stove. Forgotten until then. It remembered what I forgot. That was when I knew this was not merely pursuit, it was accumulation. It kept what I shed, my phrases, my rhythms, my hesitations, my shape, perhaps. The door handle turned, slow. I closed my eyes. Thought, do not nearer. Thought, do not answer. Thought, if it speaks again, I may speak back. The handle stopped. Silence. Then something softer than a whisper at the bottom of the door. Scratching. Letters. Patterns. Like before. At dawn, I opened the door. No one there, but scratched into the wood low near the floor. Not random lines. Words. Crude. Deep. Home is the wall. I ran my fingers through the grooves. Fresh splinters lifted. Real. Not dream. And suddenly, with a certainty colder than fear, I understood what the hand pressing through walls had always implied. It was never trying to enter this side. It was trying to make me return to its side. The wall was not barrier. It was seam. That was the final revelation, or the one I can survive telling, because what happened after may be confession, Or maybe proof I've crossed into something language fails to hold. I tested it. Yes, I know. You want to ask why. Because human beings eventually touch the wound they're told not to touch. That's why. Last night I placed my palm against the bedroom wall. Waited. Cold paint. Stillness. Then warmth. Pressure. Returned. I did not pull away. For the first time, I mirrored. Held exactly where it held. Breathing matched. In. Out. In. Out. And then, the wall gave. Not broke. Gave. Like pushing into heavy cloth. My fingers sank through paint. Into warmth. Into fur. I jerked back, screaming, hand free. Room unchanged. Wall solid. No mark. I would call that madness if not for this. When I looked at my palm afterward, there was mud in the creases. Wet earth. Forest smell. And caught in the base of my thumb. One black hair. Coarse. Too thick for dog. I burned it in the sink. Watched it curl. Thought that was the end. But tonight, while telling you all this, something has been happening I haven't mentioned because I didn't want to lose the thread. Every so often, beneath my desk, 3 taps. Far below, like from inside the floor. I ignored the first. Ignored the second. Longer than I should have. You hear the callback. You hear where this closes. Or fails to. Because just now, while writing these words, I looked down. And there is dirt collecting at the seam where wall meets floor. Falling in tiny grains, as if something on the other side is digging through. And the worst part? I don't feel only fear anymore. I feel recognition, even longing, that poisoned pull from the beginning. Like some part of me has been homesick for a place I have spent years calling monstrous. So this is my acceptance, if acceptance is possible. If you hear 3 knocks outside tonight, don't answer. If something taps back when you touch a wall, don't mirror. If a voice using your own asks to be let in, understand it may be reminding you you already did. Because there is one sound happening now as I finish this, and I know what it means. The digging stopped. There are footsteps in the hall, bare, wet, coming closer, and something just touched the wall beside me, from my side. I haven't moved since I told you something touched the wall from my side. Read that again. From my side. Not beyond plaster. Not through some imagined seam. In the room. With me. That should have been the moment of pure panic. The final scream. The collapse. Instead, what came first was a strange stillness. Like the body, after years of bracing for one impact, finally receives it and has no more flinch left. I listened. The wet footsteps in the hall stopped outside the door. No knock. That frightened me more than knocking would have. Patterns breaking always frightened me, because broken patterns mean change. And change in this story has always meant escalation. The handle did not turn. The door did not move. Minutes passed, or seconds stretched enough to impersonate them. Then, from behind me, a chair creaked. My other chair, the one across the room, occupied weight. I felt cold move through my arms, not metaphorical cold, actual, blood retreating. I did not turn. I knew better than to turn too quickly toward things I may survive only by not fully seeing. Then a sound, soft, almost affectionate. 3 taps, underneath the desk, directly below my knees. I stood so fast the chair fell backward. And for the first time in years, I spoke not to defend myself, not to question, but to accuse. What are you? Silence. Then, my own voice answered from the dark near the fallen chair. What are you? Not mimicry. Reply, perfectly timed. My throat closed, and some part of me understood a possibility I had avoided, because it was too large to hold. What if the mirroring was never imitation? What if it was correspondence? Two sides answering, two versions asking across a seam. That thought hit harder than claws ever could, because it threatened not death, division. I backed toward the bedroom, step by step, would not turn my back, and in the dim edge of hall light, I saw movement near the wall, low at first, then rising, like a figure unfolding from where shadow gathered. I saw only fragments, long arm, shoulder too narrow, head tilt I knew before seeing, recognition older than sight. And then it pressed one hand to its chest, slowly raised the other, palm out toward me. Invitation or identification, my own hand, traitor that it is, twitched upward in answer. I forced it down. Do not mirror. The rule rang through me. I whispered it aloud. The figure stopped, head angled, listening, then in my voice again. Too late. Same words from Eli's note, but sadder somehow. God help me, sadder. The thing stepped back into dark, vanished. Not rushed, receded, like withdrawing from a conversation unfinished. I should have fled then, called police, burned the apartment, done something ordinary and desperate. Instead, I did the most terrible thing yet. I opened the bedroom closet, the one where years ago I heard the teeth clicking. I don't fully know why. Maybe because every open loop was pulling at once, and I could not bear dying with none closed. Inside the closet, coats, shoebox, dark, ordinary. Then I noticed the back wall, cracked, a vertical seam where no seam should be, hairline, breathing cold. I touched it, yes, again, always touch, always the wound. The crack widened under pressure, not much, enough. Enough to see darkness beyond with depth no apartment wall could contain. Forest dark, pine smell, snow light far away. I staggered back. The closet was a passage, or seemed one. And from inside that depth, footsteps approaching, bare, wet, slow. 3 steps, pause. 3 steps, pause. I slammed the closet shut, wedged a dresser against it, sat on the floor till dawn with the axe across my knees like the old cabin had never ended. Because maybe it hadn't. Maybe I have been in one long night since the first knocks. That possibility has grown teeth in me. This morning I examined the closet wall in daylight. Solid drywall, no crack, no seam, no sign. You see the problem. Proof arrives only under conditions that discredit proof. Convenient for madness. Convenient for monsters, too. I almost decided then to stop telling this, to let uncertainty keep its veil. But something happened an hour ago. The final callback. The one that made silence impossible. I took out my grandfather's photograph again, studied the one where he pressed his hand to the north wall, and for the first time noticed someone reflected faintly in the cabin window behind him. A second figure. Inside. Watching him. Tall. Indistinct. And I realized he was outside when he mirrored the wall, which meant whatever answered him was already inside. That rearranged everything. Maybe the danger was never what comes through. Maybe it is what is already waiting within the structure, within the self. You hear the existential turn. Identity-level consequence. Here it is plain. I no longer know whether I am haunted by something external or gradually being recognized by something internal. And tonight, while thinking this, I did something I swore I wouldn't. I looked in the mirror again. Long, very long. No mismatch at first, just me. Then my reflection lifted its hand. I did not move. It pressed its palm to the glass, and on instinct, before thought, I raised mine, stopped an inch away, did not touch, but close enough. So close the heat of my skin fogged the surface, and through the fog, beneath my reflected hand, I saw 3 black notches in the reflection's thumbnail. Mine has none. I checked. None. But the reflection smiled, very slightly, before I did. I stepped away. The smile remained a beat too long. There is no acceptance in me now, only a haunted kind of clarity. The moral reckoning is simple. Every warning I received, I approached. Every seam, I touched. Every knock, even when I refused aloud, I answered inwardly with attention. Maybe attention is the true invitation. Maybe listening was the first opening. If so, you listening now may matter more than either of us likes. And I would end there, with caution, with tragedy, with closure. But something just happened as I wrote that. The fallen chair across the room, the one I never picked up, just rocked upright on its own. And someone, or something, has sat down in it. I can hear breathing, matched to mine. In, out, in, out. And just now, very gently, it laughed. The same dry little laugh I made before any of this began. That laugh ended something in me. Not courage, not sanity. Something older. The belief that imitation still implied distance, because hearing my own forgotten laugh come from across the room meant the thing in the chair was no longer borrowing from memory. It was participating in it, sharing it, or claiming it. I did not look, not immediately. I stared at the wall beyond the desk while the breathing from the chair matched mine so precisely I couldn't tell whether I was setting the rhythm or following it. In, out, in, out. Then, very softly, the chair wood creaked as weight shifted forward, leaning, the same way something once leaned against the north wall when I leaned back. Final callback, complete, a circle closing. And in that moment, instead of panic, I felt grief, raw, unexpected, for my wife, for Eli, for my grandfather standing at that wall with no one to warn him, for the version of me before the first 3 knocks. It all arrived at once, and with it came a thought so strange, I nearly spoke it aloud. Maybe it isn't hunting, maybe it's inheriting. I don't know whether that thought was revelation or contamination, but it made me turn. Slowly, finally, I looked at the chair, occupied. Yes, occupied, but not as you expect. Not fur and teeth crouched in theatrical darkness. A man sat there, or something wearing man shape, close enough to wound. My face, older perhaps, or thinner. Eyes too reflective, posture wrong in small, impossible ways, like joints remembering a different design. Hands resting on knees, and the thumbnail, 3 black notches, visible, real. He looked as startled as I felt. That is the truth, startled, as if he had expected something else to be sitting where I was. We stared. No movement, no growl, no attack. Only recognition so complete it made nausea rise. Then he spoke, not in my voice, in the voice I might have 20 years from now, weathered, worn, and said, "You kept ignoring the sounds." Not accusation, sorrow. I whispered, "What are you?" He tilted his head with that same old dog-wrong angle, then said, "The part that answered. I wish I could tell you I ran. I didn't. Because some questions, once embodied before you, pin harder than terror." I asked, "Answered what?" He smiled, small, dry, and tapped the chair arm 3 times, then raised one hand, palm outward. Invitation again. This time I understood something I had resisted through every section of this telling. Mirroring may not be copying, it may be crossing. And the rule, do not mirror, was not about reflection. It was about exchange. Do not let correspondence become substitution. Too late, maybe, because my hand rose before I chose. Met his palm halfway through empty air, not touching, almost. And between our hands, the room changed. Pressure dropped, ears rang, walls seemed farther away, like space stretched, and for one impossible second, I smelled snow, wet fur, old pine, the cabin, all at once. Then he pulled his hand back sharply, as if burned, looked past me toward the hallway. Expression changed. Fear, real fear. First I had seen in him. He whispered, "It heard you telling." And every light in the apartment went out. Dark, total, no city glow, no appliance hum, only breathing, mine, his, and a third, from the hall. He stood so fast the chair fell backward. Not me, him, or the thing wearing me. I heard claws on wood outside the room, slow, deliberate, approaching. And the one before me said, urgent now, don't let it find which one listened. Which one, not who, which. I backed away, shaking, couldn't see him anymore, only voice. Then 3 knocks sounded on the bedroom door, from outside. Pause, 3 knocks, pause, and from beside me in darkness, another 3 knocks. Answered, inside. 2 sides, both active, the seam alive. I think I screamed, I'm not sure, because the door opened. Cold entered, forest cold, and something huge moved in the threshold. I saw only eyes, low amber shine, and a shape too tall for the frame. Then violence, not toward me, between them. Impact, snarling, furniture breaking, bodies or shapes colliding in dark. I dropped to the floor, covering my head like a child, while sounds tore through the apartment. Then, silence, abrupt, absolute. Power returned, lights on, room empty, chair overturned, desk split down the middle, bedroom door hanging crooked. No one there. Nothing there, except on the floor near the fallen chair, a photograph I have never seen before. Color faded, taken inside my apartment, from behind my desk, showing me sitting where I sit now, and someone in the chair across from me, blurred, but there. Dated 12 years ago. I lived elsewhere 12 years ago. Impossible. Unless dates lie. Unless memory lies. Unless apartments are less fixed than walls pretend. That was hours ago. I have not left the room since. I have been finishing this for you because if I stop, I may have to decide which possibility terrifies me more. That something wants in, or something has been trying to keep me from it. The emotional arc should be at haunted closure now. Here it is. I don't know whether the thing in the chair was my ruin or my warning. I don't know whether what touched the wall was predator or imprisoned echo. I don't know whether I ignored the sounds too long or survived because I did. But I know this. There are now 2 sets of wet footprints on my floor. One leads to the bedroom door, one leads to my chair, and only one leads away. And while writing that, I heard 3 taps come from inside my chest. The first tap inside my chest I thought was my heart stumbling. The second made me stand. The third had rhythm, not pulse, pattern. 3 deliberate impacts from somewhere deeper than heartbeat, like knuckles against a hollow door buried behind bone. I pressed my palm to my sternum, warm skin, sweat, tremor. Then, very faint, from inside me, one knock. Pause. One knock. Pause. One knock. Counting. I made a sound I have never made before. Not scream, not sob. Recognition breaking loose. Because how do you flee when the knocking is no longer at the wall? How do you refuse entry when the scene may be under your ribs? That was the final inversion. Outside became inside. Hunter became correspondence. Monster became possibility. And I understood, with a clarity so cold it almost felt merciful, why the thing in the chair looked afraid when it heard the third presence. Because maybe it wasn't warning me against being replaced. Maybe it was warning me against being opened. I staggered to the bathroom. Mirror. I don't know why we always return to mirrors. Maybe because even at the edge of unraveling we beg the self to verify itself. I looked. My face pale, eyes blown wide, hand pressed to chest, ordinary, until my reflection slowly lifted one finger and touched its sternum where mine rested. Then tapped. 3 times. I did not move. Had not moved. It initiated. I backed away. Reflection stayed. 1 beat late. Smiling now. Not cruelly, knowingly. And for the first time, I spoke to it. What do you want? Same question. Always the same fatal question. Its mouth moved. No sound. But I read it. Open. I ran, yes, at last. Ran from the apartment into the hall barefoot, no coat, no keys. Past elevators, downstairs, out into rain. Rain so cold it shocked thought loose. I stood under streetlight, breathing steam, and for a moment, one absurd, holy moment, I believed ordinary life still existed. Cars passed. A bus hissed at the curb. A woman walked a dog under an umbrella. Reality. Blessed, indifferent reality. Then the dog stopped, turned, looked straight at me, hackles raised, whined, and began tapping one paw on wet pavement. 3 times. The woman pulled it away, startled. I laughed, couldn't help it. That dry little laugh. And the sound of my own laugh terrified me enough to stop. Because it didn't sound like mine anymore. I should have kept walking. Gone to police, hospital, church, anywhere lit. Instead I looked up. 3rd floor window, my apartment. Someone stood at the glass watching down. My silhouette, hand raised, palm out. I was in the street. Yet something shaped like me was upstairs. That should settle everything. Hallucination, you'll say. Split perception. Fine. Say it. I would, if not for what happened next. My phone rang in my pocket. I'd left it upstairs. I know I had. Still it rang. I answered without thinking. My own voice said, "Wrong side." Line dead. I dropped the phone in the gutter. Didn't retrieve it. Walked until dawn. Miles, maybe. Ended up at the river. Gray water. Rain easing. And there, sitting on a bench as if expected, Eli. Older than when he vanished. Same tobacco smell. Same blackened hands. Alive, or appearing so. I stopped 10 feet away, unable to breathe. He said, "Took you long enough." I nearly collapsed. Asked where he'd been. He looked at the river. Said, trying not to answer. Then he asked the question no one had asked me. When it tapped in your chest, did you tap back? I realized with horror. When I pressed my palm there in panic, I had. 3 unconscious beats, mirrored, answered, too late. I whispered that. He nodded, no surprise, as if confirming weather, then handed me something. My grandfather's photograph. The one I left at the cabin, wet but intact. On the back, in handwriting I recognized as my own, "If I come back, don't let me in." My knees nearly gave. I asked Eli what was happening. He said something I have turned over 1,000 times in the hour since. He said, "Every crossing leaves an echo on both sides. Problem is, echoes get hungry." Then he stood, touched my shoulder, warm, real, and said, "When you hear the next knock, choose silence." Walked away into morning fog. I followed seconds later. No one there. Bench empty, wet only where I sat. Maybe apparition, maybe man. Maybe warning from whichever side still pities me. I came back here because where else do you go when the threat may travel in you? And now we are at what should be closure. Acceptance, haunted final callback. Here, now. I am sitting again at the desk. Rain stopped, dawn trying at the window. The wet footprints on the floor are gone. The split in the desk remains, proof of something. I keep one hand over my chest, listening. Nothing for 20 minutes. Maybe silence chosen, maybe grace. But just as I wrote that, there came one knock. Inside. Pause. One knock. Pause. And before the third, someone at my apartment door knocked once. At the same time. Inside and outside. Correspondence. The seam asking decision. I am not going to answer the door. I am not going to tap back. I'm going to sit here in silence and let whatever comes pass or take me. That is my acceptance. That is the reckoning. That is where I should end. Except there was no third knock in my chest. It stopped at 2, and I have just realized why. Because the third didn't come from inside me. It came from behind me, and something very gently has placed a hand on my shoulder. The hand on my shoulder was warm, warmer than mine. That detail mattered instantly because terror had trained me to associate the other side with cold, snow breath, wet earth, winter seeping through boards. But this felt living, human almost. Fingers resting with a pressure so ordinary it broke me more than claws would have. I did not turn. Of course I didn't. I sat rigid, one hand over my chest, the other on the desk, while the weight of that hand remained. Then, a thumb moved. Once. A slow stroke across my shoulder blade. Comforting. Impossible. I began to shake so hard my teeth clicked because kindness in that moment was more destabilizing than threat. Then a voice near my ear. Not my voice. Not the dog-wrong imitation. A woman's. Soft. Hoarse with distance. She said my name. My real name. The one I haven't spoken to you. And I knew the voice before memory caught up. My wife? No, I need to be careful. It sounded like her. That is truer. That is safer. I whispered, "You're dead." She wasn't dead, of course. We had divorced. But that's what grief does. Makes absence feel like death. The voice answered, "Not the part you left listening." I turned, at last. There was no figure, no woman standing there, only the room, empty. But the hand, I swear this, remained on my shoulder 1 second longer, after nothing was there to own it. Then lifted, gone. I stood so fast I nearly fell, spun in circles like a fool. Empty room, empty hall, apartment door still shut. No one. Yet on the back of my chair, 3 long black hairs, caught where a hand might have rested. I did not touch them, did not burn them, left them there. Because something in me had shifted, not trust, but suspicion of my old categories: predator, echo, double. Now another possibility entered: memory itself. What if what crossed seams wore whatever wound could open you? Dogman in the woods, my voice in the mirror, my wife at the desk. Not forms, keys. That thought nearly made me miss the sound that came next. From the closet, the bedroom closet. One soft knock, not three, one. No pattern I knew. A break again. Change. Escalation. I walked toward it before deciding to. That longing, that poisoned pull, still there. Opened the closet. Coats. Shoebox. Dark. Ordinary. Then at the back wall, the hairline seam. Visible now, even in daylight. No denying it. I touched nothing, only stared. And from beyond the seam, children laughing. Very faint, far away. My blood turned to ice. Because I have no children. Never did. Yet the sound filled me with grief for something unwon. Potential as bait. I shut the closet, backed away, and understood the stakes had gone beyond identity. Now they reached into unlived life, into what might have been. That is how deep some things hunt. Not through flesh, through possibility. I should have left again. Instead I sat, thought of Eli, thought of choose silence. And for the first time in years, I did nothing. No touching walls, no asking questions, no answering knocks. Nothing. Just sat. Hours maybe. Light changed. Afternoon thinning. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the apartment became calm. A real calm. Not staged. Not predatory. The kind I had forgotten existed. I cried then, quietly. Not from fear, from relief so sharp it hurt. Maybe silence worked. Maybe. Then evening came, and with it the final cruelty. The phone on the desk, the one I dropped in the gutter, began ringing. There on the desk, dry. Impossible. I stared until it stopped. Started again. Screen lit with one word. Home. No number. Just that. I let it ring. Choose silence. It stopped. Good. Then a text appeared on its own. Only 3 words. You came first. I don't know why that frightened me more than anything. Maybe because it suggested origin reversed. Maybe I crossed before I was pursued. Maybe the thing in the chair was right. The part that answered. I nearly smashed the phone. Didn't. Always didn't. Always preserving the wound. Then the apartment lights flickered. Once, twice. And every reflective surface in the room, window, microwave door, framed glass, caught movement at once. Not one reflection, many, all me. All a beat misaligned, turning when I hadn't. Watching. That was the true climax. Not attack. Multiplicity. Correspondences everywhere. I shut my eyes, would not look, and in darkness heard Eli's voice as clear as if beside me. Silence. So I held it. Held silence like prayer. Held it while footsteps circled, while breath touched my neck, while one by one the sounds withdrew. Minutes. Hours. I don't know. When I opened my eyes, night was deep. Room still. Phone dark. Reflections normal. Maybe I had endured. Maybe. Then I noticed something on the desk under my hand. A folded paper. I hadn't placed it there. Opened it. Inside, in my grandfather's handwriting, the first knock is memory. The second is grief. Never stay for the third. I stared until tears blurred it. Because maybe all of this had been a warning carried generations. Maybe not monster, but inheritance of answering what should be mourned and released. And that could have been closure. Haunted, beautiful even. But I looked at the paper again just now, while writing this, and realized something I missed. There are 3 sentences, 3 knocks, and I've already heard the first, and the second, which means, if the note is true, the third is not a sound. It is an arrival. And as I understood that, the apartment door, which I have not touched, quietly unlocked. I heard the lock turn with a softness so polite, it made my skin go cold. Not a violent rattle, not intrusion announced, just the tiny mechanical click of permission changing hands. Unlocked. By itself, or by something that had learned the courtesy of doors. I did not breathe. The note lay in my hand. The first knock is memory. The second is grief. Never stay for the third. And there I was, still staying, always staying. That realization struck me with almost bitter humor. My great talent had never been surviving. It had been lingering one moment too long. The knob began to turn, slowly, and I did something I had not done once in all these years. I obeyed a warning. I stood, moved backward from the door, not toward the closet, not toward the wall, toward the window. Exit. Simple, human, ordinary. It felt revolutionary. The knob stopped. Door opened an inch. Dark hall beyond. No figure. Just apartment hallway light, yellow and weak. Then a voice from the crack. My own voice. Calm. Don't leave me here. Every muscle locked. Because if terror can wear teeth, it can also wear pleading. And pleading has always been the sharper hook for me. I nearly answered. Nearly. My mouth opened. Then Eli's words rose in me so suddenly, it felt like someone else thinking through my skull. Choose silence. I shut my mouth, said nothing. The door opened wider. 6 inches, then more. The hall empty. Still empty. Yet I heard bare, wet footsteps just beyond sight, pacing left to right, waiting, testing whether compassion would do what fear no longer could. I backed to the window, hands fumbling the latch. It stuck. Of course it stuck. I almost laughed. Dry little laugh, threatening again. Then from the open doorway, not my voice this time, my wife's, or sounding like hers. Please. That one word hit like a blade, because it carried years, regret, the unlived child laughter from the closet, all of it. This was the third arrival, not a beast, a convergence, everything unresolved wearing one threshold. I understood then why my grandfather wrote, "Never stay for the third." Because by the third, what comes is made of what you cannot bear to refuse. The window gave, shot upward, cold night air entered, rain smell, traffic far below. 3 floors, survivable maybe, maybe not. Better than answering. I swung one leg onto the sill, and behind me, the wet footsteps stopped. Silence. Then something I did not expect. A man's voice, my grandfather's, though I had not heard it in decades, rough, impatient. The way he spoke when teaching me knots as a boy. Don't look back. Authority, old as blood. I obeyed, climbed out, dropped to the fire escape. Metal screamed under my weight. Started down. 1 flight, 2. Then from above, a hand slapped the window glass. Hard. I looked despite the warning. Of course I did. And in the apartment window stood not one silhouette, many, layered. My shape, the dog-wrong tall shape, a woman, an old man, all overlapping as if several exposures shared one frame. And in front of them, the figure from the chair, the one with my face. He alone looked separate, clear. He raised his hand, not invitation, warning, then struck the glass 3 times. I climbed faster, Reached alley. Ran. Didn't stop till dawn. I'm writing this now from a motel off the highway, 2 counties south. Anonymous room, floral bedspread, ice machine humming through the wall. The kind of ordinary ugliness that once would have depressed me and now feels holy. I thought maybe distance again, maybe reprieve. Then an hour ago, housekeeping knocked. 1 knock, pause. 1 knock, pause. I froze. No third, just 2. And a note slid under the door. I waited long after footsteps left before touching it. Opened it. Blank paper except 1 sentence. In my handwriting. You left before the 3rd. Good. I stared so long my eyes watered. Because if that note is real, someone, something, is not merely pursuing. Something may be helping me break the pattern. And that possibility, after all this darkness, terrifies me almost as much as hope. But there is one last thing. When I unfolded the paper fully, there was writing on the back. Small, pressed hard, almost as if written in haste. It says, "If you hear 3 knocks again, don't run. Open." Because sometimes the thing outside is trying to get in before the thing inside you gets out.